Khabib, do you have any response?
This is everything what I expect.
In terms of what did you expect?
I'm come here for smash this guy. I don't
Smash
wanna
me,
talk.
mate. Smash
I
me.
don't wanna. I
Yeah,
don't wanna.
smash me. I'm right in front of you. Did you not see me outside the bus now? You talked a big game, now I'm here.
There was one week in UFC history so chaotic, so completely out of control, that even today fans argue it wasn't real life at all. It felt scripted. Except no writer alive would have dared stack this much insanity into 7 days. Title fights collapsed one after another. Superstars were pulled from the card in the most bizarre ways imaginable. A freak accident ended a dream matchup. A last-minute replacement nearly cut himself into the hospital. And just when the UFC thought things couldn't possibly get any worse, a global superstar stormed an arena, shattered a bus window, and sent the entire card into freefall. By the time it was over, 9 fighters were scratched, arrests were made, the lightweight division was turned upside down, and the UFC was left scrambling just to keep the event alive. Millions watched in disbelief as the organization unraveled in real time, and the aftermath changed careers, legacies, and the sport itself. If you love deep dive MMA storytelling, make sure to subscribe to MMA Desk so you never miss a new breakdown. Long before that wild week even started, the UFC lightweight division was already like a bomb waiting to go off. At the top, you had a strange problem.
I came back for the love of this, to come and shut this man up. A little rat, a little weasel. And that's it. I came back for the love of fighting and the love of war. And this, I am going to truly, truly love, putting a bad beating on this little glass jaw rat.
Conor McGregor was still listed as the champion at 155 pounds, but he hadn't defended the belt in over a year. He'd gone off to fight Floyd Mayweather in a giant boxing match, made a mountain of money, and then never came back to defend his title. So you had this belt that said champion, but the actual champion wasn't around. Under him, Tony Ferguson had become the interim champion, going on a scary win streak and looking more dangerous every single fight. Then there was Khabib Nurmagomedov, the undefeated monster from Dagestan, smashing people on the ground and barely losing a single round. Fans were split. Some said Tony was the real king. Others said Khabib was the true uncrowned champion. And hovering over all of it was Conor, loud, famous, and missing in action. This division wasn't just stacked with talent. It was filled with ego, bad blood, and huge stakes. When the UFC booked Tony versus Khabib again for April 2018, it felt like the whole sport was finally going to get an answer. We would see who the real best lightweight on the planet was. On paper, it was perfect. The wild, unpredictable finisher against the cold, crushing wrestler. Fans had waited years for this moment. What nobody knew was that this fight wasn't just important, it was cursed. The nightmare started on a day when everyone expects jokes. It was April 1st, April Fool's Day, when the news hit that Tony Ferguson was out of the fight. At first, nobody believed it. Even people inside the sport thought it had to be a prank. The story sounded way too ridiculous. Tony had been doing media, walking around a TV studio, when he tripped over a cable and tore the LCL in his knee. This is a serious ligament on the side of the knee, and the report said it was basically pulled off the bone. This wasn't some tiny tweak. This was real damage. Fans stared at their screens in shock. This fight had already fallen apart 3 times before. Illness, injuries, freak problems. Every time it got booked, something went wrong. Now for the 4th time, it was gone again. People started calling it cursed, and it was hard to argue. Dana White, the UFC president, was furious and heartbroken at the same time. He even said he would never try to make Tony versus Khabib again. Imagine working for years to build up to this moment, only to have it all destroyed by one weird step on a studio floor. But as dark and frustrating as this was, something interesting came out of it.
In the picture, why are you wearing a fluffy hat?
This is traditional headgear where I'm from, like mountains. All people who living there, they wear this because wintertime in mountain it's very cold.
Max Holloway, the featherweight champion at 145 pounds, agreed to move up and fight Khabib on just 6 days' notice. One dream fight had collapsed, but another one had suddenly appeared out of nowhere, and fans grabbed onto it like a life raft. Max Holloway stepping in felt like one of those rare moments where a fighter becomes a legend before the cage door even closes. Max was already on a huge win streak at featherweight, and people were starting to talk about him as one of the best in the world. Now he was agreeing to fight Khabib, the undefeated monster, with almost no time to prepare, in a weight class above his own. The press conference between them lit the fuse all over again. Max was calm, funny, and confident. Khabib was serious, strong, and focused. The crowd went crazy. Some people started to say this new matchup was just as exciting as Tony versus Khabib, maybe even better. It had that same wild energy that fans felt before Conor McGregor fought Nate Diaz on short notice. But behind all the hype, something was off. Max had to cut a lot of weight in a very short time, and he had just come off an injury. The New York Commission watched him closely. His nutritionist gave interviews about how big and tough the cut would be, bragging about how extreme it was. Those comments didn't make people feel impressed. They made people feel nervous. As the days went on, rumors started swirling that Max didn't look right. He looked drained, tired, and not like his usual self. Then came the huge blow. The commission said Max Holloway was medically unfit to keep cutting and pulled him from the fight. Just like that, the second main event in a week was gone. The card was sliding toward disaster, and the week wasn't even close to finished. While all this was happening at the top of the card, trouble was brewing somewhere else. It started with words, not punches.
Dustin was saying you were both looking up at the clock.
Yeah. When I saw Dustin looking at the clock, I heard my corner say 30 seconds. And I saw Dustin looking at the clock. I was like, this motherfucker's going to try to point down before me. You know what I mean? So I'm glad he let me do the point down and we did it. And that was fun.
He kind of admitted you got the better of it and he was forced to clinch up with you. So 3-0 on the point downs, I guess you are.
It is. Yeah, it is what it is.
Artem Lobov, a close friend and teammate of Conor McGregor, did an interview where he talked about Khabib. In that interview, he didn't just criticize Khabib's style or record. He used a word in Russian that hit a lot harder than a simple insult. In English, some people tried to soften it by calling it chicken, but in Russian it has a much nastier meaning, tied to weakness and shame. That clip was translated and spread online. It didn't take long for it to reach Khabib. You have to remember, Khabib comes from a culture where respect is huge, and being called something like that is not taken lightly. A few days later, Khabib and his team saw Artem at the Fighter Hotel. Cameras caught what happened next. Khabib and several of his teammates walked up to Artem in a hallway. Khabib pressed him, speaking sharply, asking why he had talked like that. Artem looked trapped, backed up against a wall, trying to explain himself. No one threw punches, but the message was clear. Disrespect wouldn't just be ignored. That clip hit the internet immediately. Fans started taking sides. Some thought Khabib went too far by surrounding Artem with a group. Others said Artem brought it on himself with his words. What everyone agreed on was that the tension between the two camps had exploded, and one person was never going to let that go unnoticed: Conor McGregor. When he saw one of his closest teammates being surrounded and checked like that on camera, he didn't just tweet about it, he decided to show up in person. What happened next is not just a fight story, it's one of the wildest moments in all of sports.
To this day, one of my favorite moments at a weigh-in is Khabib before the Conor fight, where he says to the audience, I'm gonna smash your face.
And he did.
And he did. But it was just, that was like Khabib trash talking, which you never heard.
When Conor heard what happened with Artem in that hotel, he jumped on a private jet with a group of friends and teammates and flew straight to New York. The UFC was holding media day at the Barclays Center, and fighters were on a bus leaving the arena. That's when Conor and his group stormed the building. Video shows them charging down the hallway, shouting looking for Khabib. When they reached the bus, they started throwing objects. Conor picked up a metal dolly and hurled it at the bus window. The glass exploded. People inside were yelling and ducking. It looked like a riot scene, not a sports event. This wasn't some staged stunt. Fighters were actually hurt. Michael Chiesa got cuts on his face. Ray Borg took glass to his eye. Both of them had to be pulled off the card and taken out of their fights. Artem was also removed for being part of the group. The UFC president was furious, calling it the most disgusting thing he had ever seen in company history. The video went everywhere. News outlets that never talked about MMA suddenly had Conor's mugshot on their front pages. Later that night, Conor turned himself into police, spent the night in a cell, and faced several charges. In the end, he got off with community service and classes, but his image changed forever. The whole thing started because he wanted to defend Artem. Years later, Artem would end up suing Conor over a business deal involving whiskey, showing just how strange and twisted this story would become over time.
They make a Medoff loss. That's Tempore loss.
Where's he gone, but where's he now?
He's retired.
Yeah, well, boy, he went sprinting. He's gone. Shit, his jocks became fat and riding off. He done nothing in the sport. All he done in the sport.
But in that moment, all anyone cared about was this. The card was falling apart, the UFC looked completely out of control, and somehow they still didn't even have a stable main event. With all this chaos going on, you might think Khabib would pull out, or at least refuse to keep dealing with the madness. But Khabib remained calm in his own way. He said he didn't care who he fought, as long as he finally got to fight for the real belt. The problem was, the UFC was running out of bodies. Tony was out, Max was out. Conor was in jail and definitely not fighting that weekend, so they started working through every possible name. First up was Anthony Pettis. He was a former champion already on the card, and on paper it made a lot of sense, but he was slightly over the weight limit, and there were money issues and contract details that didn't get sorted. Pettis later said he didn't want to take such a dangerous fight against Khabib on short notice without a proper camp. Then there was Michael Chiesa, but he had those cuts from the broken glass, and the commission wouldn't clear him. Next was Paul Felder. He was on a win streak and had just knocked out Charles Oliveira, who would later become champion. He was ready to go, but the New York Commission stepped in again and blocked him, saying he wasn't ranked high enough to fight for a title. It was a strange call, because rankings are made by media members and are often very random. Still, the decision stood. Everything seemed stuck. That's when Al Iaquinta's name came up. Al was already scheduled to fight Paul Felder, and he had weighed in at 155.2 pounds, which is fine for a normal fight, but too heavy for a title bout. For a title fight, you need to be at or under 155 with no extra allowance. That meant if he fought Khabib, only Khabib could officially win the belt. Al could win the fight but not become champion on paper. Still, Al agreed to step in on one day's notice. It was a wild move from a guy who had been arguing with the UFC about pay, and had even gone into real estate to make money. Now he was about to fight the scariest man in the division on almost no preparation, in a fight where he couldn't even officially win the title. It was the kind of thing that made no sense at all, and yet it saved the card. After all those crazy twists, the main event finally happened. Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Al Iaquinta for the lightweight title, but only Khabib could actually win the belt. The fight itself didn't have the wild back and forth that people had imagined for Tony versus Khabib, but it had its own kind of story. From the start, Khabib did what he always does. He took Al down, controlled him on the ground, and smothered him with pressure. The first rounds looked like a typical Khabib fight, with Al stuck under him, trying to survive. But as the fight went on, something interesting happened. Khabib started striking more and wrestling less, testing his stand-up in a real fight. Al, tired and outgunned, still refused to go away. He kept swinging, kept talking, kept trying to make something happen. Even though he was losing on the scorecards, he never broke. When the final bell rang, there was no doubt about the winner. Khabib had dominated and finally became the undisputed UFC lightweight champion, but the route to that moment had been so strange that it almost felt unreal. This wasn't the clean, perfect crowning the UFC had planned. It was messy, patched together, and full of last-second changes. Around the rest of the card, the damage was clear. Fighters like Chiesa, Borg, Lobov, Felder, and others had been removed. Tony and Max had already fallen out. In total, 9 fighters were taken off the event in just 1 week. What should have been a straightforward championship event had turned into a rescue mission. The UFC managed to land the plane, but almost every engine had caught fire along the way. Looking back, that week did more than just break a fight card. It changed the whole shape of the division and the sport. Khabib's win over Iaquinta made him the official champion, which later set up his giant fight with Conor McGregor, a bout that broke pay-per-view records and took their rivalry to a new level. Tony Ferguson never got his undisputed title shot against Khabib. Every time the UFC tried to book it again, something else went wrong, and fans still talk about that matchup as one of the greatest what-ifs in MMA history. Max Holloway went back to featherweight, where his legend kept growing, but the chance to shock the world at lightweight that week slipped away forever. Conor's rampage at Barclays Center changed how people saw him. He was still a superstar, but the wild charm that made him a fan favorite now came with a darker edge. The bus attack turned into a symbol of how fame and pressure could push a fighter past the line. The UFC itself took a hit too. For a full week, the company looked like it had lost control of its own show. Title fights fell apart. The commission kept stepping in. A top star got arrested. Fighters were injured not in the cage, but on a bus. It showed how fragile even the biggest, richest fight promotion can be. One freak injury, one heated hallway moment, one out-of-control reaction, and everything can fall apart. That's why fans still talk about this as the week that completely broke the UFC. Not because the company died, but because for 7 straight days, the illusion that everything was under control shattered in front of the whole world. In the end, that week didn't just create chaos, it rewrote the entire story of the UFC. It exposed how quickly a massive organization can lose control when injuries, bad luck, personal feuds, and pure emotion all collide at once. It pushed fighters into situations no one could have predicted, created legends in the middle of madness, and changed the paths of entire careers. Khabib walked out as champion, but the road there was anything but smooth. Tony's dream fight slipped through his fingers again. Max stepped into a storm he never asked for. Conor crossed a line that the whole world saw. And the UFC, for the first time in a long time, looked like it was holding everything together with thin tape and hope. Years later, fans still talk about that week like it was a movie with too many plot twists, except every moment was real. It was messy, dramatic, unbelievable, and unforgettable. It remains the clearest example of how unpredictable MMA can be, and why no fight week will ever compare to the one that nearly broke the entire sport. If you enjoy deep dive MMA stories like this, make sure you subscribe to MMA Desk so you never miss a new breakdown.